lovely panel, Bridging the Gap in VFX, Collaboration and Innovation. That's the title, and what this implies, we will learn a lot about today. Before we introduce ourselves, just a little bit about why we're doing this and with whom we're doing it. So, of course, hosted by the VIEW Conference, thanks to Maria Elena, and supported by the Visual Effects Society. For those who do not know the Visual Effects Society, give me 2 sentences of a little bit of advertisement. So we're collaborating a lot in between artists and supporting artists, having events for artists and production people in the visual effects industry. Besides this, we're also trying to support their professional careers wherever possible and needed. And third, but last but not least, it's a network. And especially for our geeky colleagues who do not always like to go out, I think it's a very unique and good opportunity to collaborate and work together. And you have the chance to meet these crazy, amazing, creative, intelligent people.
Is that crazy, comma, amazing?
Yes. But only, I mean, it depends. Kevin, maybe you want to go a little bit deeper into this when you introduce yourself. No, I'm just kidding. So yes, exactly. So this is a little bit why we're here and who brought us together here. Introducing ourselves, because I just have the mic, I start with myself. Hi, I'm Christina. I'm your host today. When I'm not a host on a panel, I'm the executive producer for the Cinesite group, working from Canada to India, and the managing director of Trixter, small visual effects company in Germany.
My name is Michael RALLA. I'm a visual effects supervisor, most recently on Ryan Coogler's Sinners. I started 2004 at Scanline in Germany. I'm originally from Germany, lived in LA since 2010. And yeah, I think this is a good moment to pass on the mic.
Hey everyone, I'm Christine. I started as a PA at Trixter as well, many, many years ago, where I randomly took a job to pick up pizzas for 4 weeks at midnight and somehow got stuck there. I'm now a strategic development manager for Adobe, which is fairly cryptic corporate for I represent product and engineering on the ground, and I work with creative studios, production companies to make sure they get the best creative output with our tools. And before that, I was with Netflix overseeing the VFX work from Germany, Austria, and Switzerland for about 5 years.
I'm Kevin Bailey. I'm the head of studio at Eyeline, which is a sort of a Netflix company. So we're very tightly integrated with Netflix and all the content creation and product work that happens there. I come from a background as a visual effects supervisor, second unit director, and owned a visual effects company called Atomic Fiction. Kind of came up through being a generalist. My first job in the industry was Star Wars Episode 1, doing previs. So I am old.
I was just saying max 25, right?
My name is Johnny Han. I was most recently the visual effects supervisor and second unit director on The Penguin, an original series by HBO.
Won an Emmy.
Thank you. Thank you. I got started in 2001 doing commercials in New York. As everyone does in New York, while I was in school there, and then moved to LA in 2003 on Smallville as a 3D, 2D, did everything back then. And so, yeah, that's my story.
Thank you so much. When we dive a bit into the topic of collaboration and innovation, so this comes with an understanding of the industry, I would say. And as you guys just stated quite clearly, you do have an understanding of the industry. So how has this industry we're all working in has changed for you in the past, let's say 2 years, because there was quite a significant change going on, probably. Anybody who starts volunteering? Please?
Yeah, I'll start with that one because I had like a very kind of profound on the ground experience with, I'm sure your question is referring to generative AI and AI of those sorts. And so the last project that I worked on before I joined Eyeline, I've been with Eyeline for a year now, but the last project that I worked on was Robert Zemeckis' movie called Here. And it's this movie that's like very experimental where the camera never moves. Like literally the camera's in a living room and it never moves the entire film. But the thing that moves is time. So we're constantly jumping back and forth in time to tell the stories of a handful of families and their sort of life experiences. Tom Hanks and Robin Wright star, Paul Bettany and Kelly Riley. She's in Yellowstone, like they're in it. So these recognizable actors, and you know, we needed to depict them playing themselves from like 20 years old up until their 80s. So it was important that like we didn't cast a different actor to play Tom Hanks, because everybody knows what young Tom Hanks looked like. So we kind of like, we started working with a company called Metaphysic at the time, where they were just getting to the point with like neural kind of AI-driven face swaps to that they might be good enough to use in production. We didn't know for sure, but the story wasn't going to work without it. So we kind of took a bet and said, all right, you know, we did a test with them. It looked good enough to give us the confidence that this movie can in fact be made, and leaned into that. And so we ended up doing about 53 minutes worth of face swap work, like complete face replacement, to do this sort of de-aging and aging work on that production. And because we were already using AI on the movie, sort of had a free pass to use it in a bunch of other places. So usually it's bad form as a visual effects supervisor to use the word I in any sentence, because it is a team that does the work. But like, I was able to finish a bunch of shots of environment extensions for the movie by using like creative upscalers like Magnific to take work that wasn't quite done from one of our VFX vendors that was having a schedule crunch at the end, and actually insert all this photographic detail, adjust key to fill, like just basically make it look photographic. These tools help me do this stuff in hours where the visual effects company was struggling to do it in weeks. So it was very transformative for me as a visual effects supervisor to kind of take this, like, you know, the 25 years of experience that I had in like learning how to do digital human 3D faces, and come to the conclusion is like, well, I never want to do that again, right? It's like all this knowledge, I'm grateful to have it, but with the new tool set, it's just like a better way to do it that doesn't risk putting you in the uncanny valley. And it was just, you know, between that and the environment work, it was like this, like, oh, here's the new way of doing it. And there will be another new way, you know, again and again and again, but that's part of what makes this industry fun.
Yeah, speaking of making this industry fun, you know, I was just thinking about when you said 25 years and 25 years of experience on Sinners, I felt like I was traveling 25 years back into the past, because we were shooting 65mm IMAX film, and all of a sudden you're I don't want to say stuck, but you have a workflow that really didn't really evolve for 25 years. And then you're pairing that with some very similar work to what you were doing on here, which is almost bookending those 25 years in a you know, in an interesting way, because it's such a juxtaposition, you know, between the old and the very new, and you know, so to me, the last 2 years weren't necessarily about like just innovation, but also about learning what was done in the past, which I thought was really interesting, and certainly very new to me. But you know, now I'm like it's a very different mindset that I have since then, and since going through that, and it really did open a different horizon for me.
I think the mindset piece is also interesting, coming in from the Netflix perspective. When I first started in 2020, it was more like VFX rarely ever had a seat at the table of the HODs, and we're like, we'll just support you as best as we can, we'll get things done, we'll provide the best work. But then over the last couple of years, there was a lot more curiosity from the adjacent departments, from post-production as well as production, to learn more about how you actually do the cool things you're doing and how you're going to work together. And it's a lot about education and bringing everyone on the same page, which I think is going to change even further in the upcoming couple of years with these new generative workflows that we're looking into, just looping people in more, doing a lot more sharing and collaboration and being transparent about this, which might take a little bit of time, right? Because we were talking about efficiencies too, but that's going to change how we work altogether.
When we're talking about being transparent, or being radical transparent even, about communication workflows, so do you feel, Johnny, then that our communication is more on eye level since like the past years, that studio partner side is more like, okay, we're collaborating from the very beginning? Or was this something that was always given, that you feel like with new tools is just improving, or isn't it even improving? Or what's your take on that?
I mean, from the production side, you know, with other departments on a production, I think in the past there's been a sort of mysticism of like, all right, visual effects, you guys do what you do, and it was so abstract and so not in the common public conversations that I think they didn't really care much about how we did things, right? Like we've been scanning actors for, you know, who knows how long, and that was always just part of the process. All right, you guys do what you do, your truck comes, and but now there is this curiosity from all the departments to say, well, how are you doing that? And oh, is that thing I heard of on, you know, Engadget last week? And so it's forced us to be a little bit more vocal to explain, like, well, let me explain, we're just scanning you in the traditional sense, and this is not for you know, generative characters, and in the example of scanning, which I think has come up for everyone now, when I've never said this yet, but when a talent comes and says, well, I don't want you to scan me because I don't want you to use AI to replace me, and I've never said this yet because I don't know how to articulate it, but the correct answer is, well, it's not AI, because if it was AI, I wouldn't need to scan you, you know?
True.
And so we are doing our diligence by doing it in this, you know, very much analytical, you know, old school method, right? I mean, that will change obviously, but we definitely have had to do a level of education now to other departments. And the whole like, oh, you just do what you do behind the curtain is getting more, that current's getting much more transparent. People want to know now what's behind it.
I have this dream that like there's going to be enough backlash to Gen AI that like visual effects is going to start becoming like the cool, like we did it for real, but like we did it using.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. I was thinking about that too. Oh, cool. There's a potential new scapegoat on the horizon. You know, I mean, look, the role and the position of the VFX department is can be really tricky, and you know, like I think we've all been there. I wouldn't say we're necessarily equally ranked between all the other crafts. You know, at least in the States. Speaking of unions and you know, also how you're treated. At the same time, so speaking of radical transparency, which sounds like something straight out of Burning Man. So one thing that I realized, I've been very tech focused for a long time. You know, like to me, communication and also collaboration, all of that was sort of tech or data driven. So I felt like the best service that I could do to a VFX partner down the line who would do the shot execution would be to get as much data and capture as much information during the shoot as we can. You know, and ideally we get metadata from the camera, smart lenses, and all of that stuff. But then, you know, Johnny, you just said something that I think is really good. We do what we do, and you know, I've had a cinematographer who one day just asked me straight up, "Why do you guys make shit up?" Why, you know, like, and it is because we do what we do, you know, and we get into post, and very often at that point, a lot of that team from principal photography that was there for prep and that was there during production is gone. And then, you know, like there's been the mindset, especially at like the big studios, for instance, you know, I was at Marvel, it was definitely the case. You're with a director, and then from this point forward, we got it, and we'll take it from him. We'll do whatever's needed. We'll design whatever is required, you know, do the set extensions, do wardrobe, whatever, you know, trying to be as faithful and truthful to what we think was the creative intent during production. What we really try to do on Sinners is actually preserve creative intent deep into post. I gotta be honest, that wasn't an easy thing to do because you're essentially exposing yourself to some degree. But you know, we had like a train station where we basically only filmed the building with a bunch of people in front of it, because production could not find something that was suitable for principal photography, and let alone the, you know, any trains that were still working. So it was clear that had to be a CG extension, a CG train and all of that. And then when it came to actually designing whatever we didn't have doing photography, I called the production designer. I was like, can you send me all your references from principal photography? Can you send me everything what we have? And can I send you our concepts, which were human-made, actually not Gen AI at that point. And I got a bunch of notes back. It was just like pages and pages and pages of stuff, you know, and I was like, oh my God, I just should have done what we do and done it myself. But then, you know, and it went through several rounds, and it got to a point where it's like, this is painful, quite frankly. But then at the same time, you know, we ended up with something that is cohesive and seamless to the creative intent that she had when she designed the rest of the movie. And, you know, that was quite an epiphany for me, where it's like, okay, so it does actually look really seamless because it looks like the rest of the film, because it was designed by the person who actually did the rest of the film. And the same for like wardrobe. We actually had quite a few wardrobe pieces that needed to be changed, that needed to be extended. You know, there's a lot of stuff like that. And I wrote Ruth Carter and texted her. I was like, can you help me with this? Because I don't want to just do it because we can. And you know, like probably the most extensive collaboration we had was with a cinematographer. And I said to her, if you don't want me to make shit up, you're gonna come in with me and frame the shot and then light it the way you would light it as if we were still on set. Because that's the only way how you actually preserve that creative intent. But again, you know, it took hours, and it wasn't easy because you're basically exposing yourself. It feels like a weakness. But ultimately, you know, I look at the final results, and it's funny. I was just talking to her about that. You know, she's like, oh, you know, there's really not that many VFX in the film. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, there's 1,000 shots, you know, like 1/10 of the budget was spent on VFX. And you have 2 all CG shots on your website, you know, showing your cinematography from the film that you did light, yes, and you did frame, but ultimately you didn't shoot them. You know, so, but I'm glad they're along the lines of what you wanted. And that to me was like the biggest compliment, where it's like, look, these 2 shots, CG. And, but I'm glad you like them.
But I love what you just said, because you're saying like you're exposing yourself and it feels like a weakness, but it's actually not, right? Like also sharing cuts early on, sharing all your concepts. Like a lot of times these first rough edits or your first cut, people don't want to share those because it feels vulnerable. Like it's your little baby and you don't want to loop in as many people, but really you're going to get to that creative intent and what you're planning to do so much faster if you also loop in VFX early, share all the takes, just turn everything over. Like whatever is a mistake might be a clean plate for VFX later on. There's so much you can do with it, and you're hiring skilled filmmakers to collaborate with you on this project. So why not trust them that they can make a great judgment call to work with you on that creative intent? But I feel like we're increasingly coming to a point where that vulnerability almost feels like you're navigating egos, and you're paying people a lot of money to make sure how are we gonna make sure that person is on board with us, rather than just trusting we're gonna do our stuff and turn this into the most amazing film or series you've seen.
Egos in the film business?
No, never.
Never. I mean, the 2 of us certainly. Zero ego.
But I think it really goes along with what we said previously when we sat together for a coffee. It's about reading the room a lot. So there is, especially in our industry, it's a lot about, besides the technical hard and soft skills, you have to have a lot of ability to read the room, to read the people around you. Do you feel it's also, there is, so as you said, there is a certain openness to learn what VFX means, but there is also a long way to go? You tell me.
I don't think most filmmakers will ever learn what visual effects, how it works, or
That's so sad.
well, I think it's just the truth of it. And part of the reason why is it is a very technical process. And I see this even, you know, working within Netflix. Like we partner with like the data science and engineering team on the product side of Netflix, which is sort of a group that works outside of ours. But they do like very VFX adjacent research and like stuff that we, you know, that helps us work more efficiently in production. Super smart researchers, way smarter than I am, right? But I've been in the film industry for 25, 30 years, right? And so when we have conversations, they almost always start out like, you know, they're speaking German and I'm speaking English, right? And we don't understand each other, because it is, no matter how smart you are, there's this sort of this thing that is the insanity of production, but visual effects has its own insanity, and it's a blend of that technical and the kind of like production stuff. So yeah, I don't think most filmmakers will, like, in the same way that a data scientist will never really truly understand what we do, I think most filmmakers also will never truly understand what we do. That said, that is one of the reasons why I'm excited about this sort of new wave of generative tools, because to the point you were saying earlier, it's like, you know, most of the time in production, they're not like, you're developing assets and lighting scenes and whatever when all those HODs, those live action HODs, are long gone. But what these generative tools are allowing us to do is actually pull a lot of that discovery work, like the true creative discovery work, into prep when all those people are there. They're all, and by the way, some directors don't like that. They're like, no, I really don't want my costume designer weighing in on this character design, right? I really wished we'd done this in post instead. So there's like a few little workflow things, but I think that predominantly most filmmakers, like, this is a net new thing that these generative tools are going to do, so that next time Michael goes to do a show, he's not going to have to send that text, you know, 3 months into post, because all those conversations are going to have happened and prep.
Do you think we need some standards, also including Gen AI tools, that are do's for upcoming shows that you're on, or don'ts, where you say like, oh gosh, let's not do this? I mean, it must not be related to AI. It can also be related to what you say, okay, there is something that we all should agree on in order to speak the same language, as Kevin said, or is there something that makes it easier from your perspective to exactly work on these parts?
I mean, from a tool perspective, we were still, as a society, as an industry, we're figuring out where we stand, and we're still trying to figure out how to even have the conversation that everyone's kind of having in a different version, from moral, ethics, copyright, legal standpoints, plus the creative bit. I think we do need to come to a point where we're at least having a similar terminology to even have that conversation. I think we're on a good path to have that. So we differentiate between assistive, corrective, and expressive workflows in AI, as in the assistive ones strictly focusing on efficiencies, where you might not even have that much of a legal conversation, right? Whereas the expressive ones, you're still kind of navigating and feeling out that space. But that's our three terminology, like our three terms. People are using these words differently, and you kept saying about how much you dislike it just being called intelligence, right? So we're still at that point where we're arguing about this rather than the much larger topics.
And just one note on that. So I think that one of the reasons why I think it is important to sort of put some definitions around this is because if we don't, as the film industry, our governments are going to, right? And they're going to do it using information that isn't like fully complete, right? So I think if we don't self-regulate, somebody else is going to do it. And I think that's like one of the reasons, not to toot our own horn, but like Netflix a couple months ago released the sort of industry first guidance on use of Gen AI in production. And it's actually funny because a lot of people misread the guidance, right? The guidance basically says, like, in these scenarios, it's totally fine, go for it. In these scenarios, exercise caution. In these scenarios, ask us, like, talk to the studio, because it might be fine or it might not. But a lot of people misread it as basically saying, oh, Netflix said no AI on the movies. It's like, that's not at all what the guidance says. It just is like, here's a framework for how we can be responsible in this time where there are a lot of gray areas. And like, worrying about ethics in filmmaking is like, people are talking about that like it's a new thing. It's not a new thing. We've been facing that, to Johnny's point, of like, we've been scanning actors and doing 3D representations of them for decades. The only difference now is that it, like, the unethical thing used to be very expensive and hard to do. Now it's cheaper and faster to do, right? And so that's where I think people are starting. That's why I got a call from Tom Hanks's agent literally the day after I showed him the first test of him de-aged, right? Like, it was like instant, like, you know, it's like, hey, we should talk about some wording in this contract.
Ooh.
That's really interesting to hear. You know, I think one thing to keep in mind here is that for whatever reason, everyone seems to be just latching on to like generative AI when it comes to creating images and pixels and all of that. But I think we should not forget that there's very, very functional AI tools that can actually help with everything within VFX that has nothing to do with images, you know, on the production side. And yeah, you guys said something really interesting, oh, not really, really cool yesterday, which is efficiencies are sexy. And I think you know, like just checking historic bids for and making projections based on those, and there's all sorts of stuff where you can use AI for just processes and workflows that don't have anything to do with making images. To me, that's where I would use it first. And I remember having that conversation when I was still at Framestore, where my manager was telling me, yeah, you should look into all of this stuff and, you know, the latest tools and, you know, that, and I did. And at some point I said, like, why didn't you look into like, you know, optimizing your whole production workflow? And because like all those numbers that are generated and getting collected on ShotGrid or whatever it is called right now, all that data is there and you can actually make use of it. And that's, you know, like ChatGPT can do that. I'm doing that on a daily basis with like my receipts and, you know, my taxes and that kind of stuff. Like, I think that's where I would start. And then we'll work on our way into like whatever it has to do with images, which is getting better by the day. But you know, like there's already highly functional tools for everything else. And I think we should not forget that.
Johnny, do you want?
Well, it's just interesting because anytime someone asks me like where AI fits into all of it, you know, I always think about, well, what is visual effects? And in the production meeting, I always describe it as in a production meeting, we're the ones that solve for X, right? You go through the script and then there's a moment where like it gets quiet because no department wants to raise their hand to say, how are we going to do this scene? And then everyone looks at me, and then I'm like, okay, fine. I think we should do like the blood in CG, but maybe costumes can tear the clothing and we can have a spare. And then, you know, so it's really, we've always existed to be the effect, right? The thing that doesn't fall so neatly into any of the classic departments. And, you know, historically, we were painting crowds on glass. And we still are, you know, making models and using robotic arms to film it. And then came computer graphics, and now comes AI. So, and then, you know, I think about like on Penguin towards the end, we're very low time left. And then we did stuff, you know, all right, just go buy some Halloween blood on Amazon and in the kitchen, and we're going to shoot some elements, you know, and we do everything from that still all the way to, okay, the top of that building isn't working. Let's do 10 Photoshop, you know, iterations, generative iterations, just get an idea of what it should be. And the fact that we're using those two tools in the same office in tandem, I think goes to, for me at least, it shows that we still have to consider it. Everyone's saying that it's a tool. Yes, we all know it's a tool, but there's still so many fun toys to play with in that toolbox. And for instance, going back to the elements thing, I remember doing an element shoot for the show, and people were asking on set, like, oh, is this to like train AI, or is this to, because we had some really interesting ones where like we sprayed a mannequin with water, like a hose, and it, you know, everyone's like, how is that going to key, and how is that? And I was like, don't worry about it. They're like, oh, it must just be for training a model or something. And I was like, no, we're just gonna use that, guys. It's not, we're not doing anything too crazy here. We're just shooting this element to put into the shot, right? But that's not to say that will evolve into an AI thing. So I just think that the more you mix these things up, and whether it's AI applied at the generative level or computational level, you know, like, I don't know if you guys have seen this DLSS stuff where we can ray trace like 1/10 of the rays and then fill in the rest. I mean, it's mind-blowing, but that's not in any way, I mean, that's all built on trained models, but it's not generative per se, right? It's simply computational infilling, right? And so, and then all the way down to, it's not pixels at all, but it's just spoken word and some math and large language models. I don't know what the original question was, but I think
It's totally interesting what you're saying. So
I just think, you know, all these things fit into solving for X. That's what it was. Is that, you know, I don't like it when everyone thinks, well, all visual effects will be done this way, because it can't be. And if you're doing it that way, you're not doing it smart, right? Because, you don't hit everything with a hammer.
And thanks for saying Photoshop. Appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and so, you know.
Say Firefly.
And on
Do
the
a
show,
Beetlejuice, say it 3 times.
Our show spanned like 2 years because of the strikes, and there's all kinds of pauses. And I remember before I left for New York, I had some friends over, nothing to do with the show, just my place in LA, and had some friends over, and someone was like, oh my God, there's this thing called Midjourney. I was like, really? And we airstream to the TV so we could all participate and like type something in. And I had only like 2 weeks ago finally got back to LA. My place was rented out, and finally got my place back. And we just realized, hey, this is the same group of people. And it was that TV that we were just so fascinated by this stuff that we were so innocent about. And now, you know, look where we've come. So even the span of one show from beginning to end, it's if I had to rebid that show from now, it'd be completely different.
But that's actually great, isn't it? That we're evolving and that we're also being part of it. So I would say, and to one point that came up in previous discussions, I'd say like we all have to embrace to a certain point what comes next, because otherwise we're not part of this industry probably.
Yeah, you know what? Something just came to my mind, and we've talked about this before. There's 2 very interesting observations that I've made recently, and you know, this is not my opinion; these are real, just observations. So, number 1, I have 2 kids, 5 and 8 years old, and we, on the last project that I was doing after we finished the film. The older one was looking, I was just showing him some whips of some of the visual effects work, and he was like, oh, is that AI? And I said, no, this is not AI, but I know it looks unfinished. And, you know, and then, so, you know, he has, at this point, he has really developed like a certain eye for certain things. You know, he's got 2 parents who are both visual effects supervisors, full disclosure. So then we were watching a bunch of trailers the other day, and there's a, I'm not going to name the film because I really don't want to be disrespectful to the work in any kind of way, but there's a film that is about to come out. It's not Avatar, and you know, we looked at the trailer together, and they both said, "Is that AI?" And that was the trailer. And you know, it's a really VFX heavy movie. It's also not Tron, because the boy saw Tron and he didn't say that about that film. But you know, and then we watched it again and was like, are those even real people in that trailer? And they definitely are real people. But I thought it was really interesting that he perceived that whole trailer as being AI. And, you know, we've done, you know, what you've done, and we experimented with Midjourney, and I was like, you know, tell me what you imagine, what you want to imagine. And it was a game for a while, you know, can we imagine something? And we were typing into Midjourney, and he saw what came out of it. And, you know, it progressively got better and better and better. But like, what I think may come at some point is that there's gonna be a little bit of an oversaturation with all this AI generated content that we're bombarded with on a daily level. You know, I look on I look at Instagram and you know, I'm following a lot of those typical AI companies, and it, you know, it has a look and it looks great, but it somehow does have a look. And I keep wondering, okay, is that because it was trained on like a lot of blockbusters from the last 10 years? You know, I mean, now this whole thing about like ethical models and all of that is coming up, and you know, I'm sure a lot of those AI models are not, at least not at this point, you know. But have we produced, or have we been producing a certain look for the last 10 years? You know, the superhero blockbuster movies and all of that, and they do have a look. And is that what my son is now associating with AI? And then, you know, on the complete other side of the spectrum, I was fascinated to hear that Nolan sold out film screenings for Odyssey 1 year in advance. And it was specifically the 70mm film screenings, you know, at the Universal City Walk in Los Angeles, but also worldwide. And you know, so we did, to just go a little bit further down that tangent, we did a screening of Cines for like some of the parents who live in the neighborhood and who were just taking care of the kids while I was shooting. And it was at the IMAX headquarters in Los Angeles, and we were showing them a 70mm film projection. And a lot of these people who all mostly work in finance and are doctors and lawyers, you know, we're sort of the creative unicorns in this weird bubble, were like, this was amazing to see, and it made such a big difference. And it reminded us of like watching movies in the 90s, you know, with the grain, the scratches and all of that. And it somehow gave it an authenticity that we haven't seen in a long time. And, you know, so I'm putting these two examples, these two crazy juxtapositions together. I'm like, okay, is there potentially like a desire for whatever is perceived as more authentic? And is there like an association shooting something on film, which is physical media, with being more authentic? You know, without necessarily going full Nolan and saying like, no, we're going to do everything practical, and, you know, being what did James Gunn call it, a practical effects fundamentalist. You know, like, but is there an authenticity that we get from like actually going a little bit back in time and making theatrical projections more of like an event again, and going to the movies and watching movies and enjoying them the way we did in the past, and like leaving fully generated AI content? And, you know, again, this is not meant to be disrespectful in any kind of way. I'm embracing that stuff too. I'm playing with it, all of that. But is that more going to be a thing for TV? I don't know.
Well, I just want to like make a point that, and I totally hear what you're saying in terms of like this sort of like authenticity that is associated with like a 70mm projection. At the same time, I feel the need to point out that films are totally inauthentic, 100% inauthentic, like, and they have been for 130 years, right? I mean, you know, Robert Zemeckis, who I've had the great fortune to work with for 15, almost 20 years, he loves to point out that the close-up is the most unnatural visual effect in all of movie making, right? Because this actor is supposed to give the most emotional performance of the entire scene with a big piece of glass in their face and the grips behind them with their bellies hanging out, and like they're surrounded and they're supposed to, you know, pour their heart out. Films are not authentic. And so I think that like, I think the way I perceive what you're saying is that there is a style of storytelling that, you know, people go see plays, people want to see physical, like, you know, physical film projection. I also think that like AI music is starting to get like scary good, right? And there's like a thing I listened to the other day that's like it's from an account that is like on YouTube labeled like fake music or something like that, but it's a soul rendition of Strawberry Fields. And it is so fucking good. Like, it is so good. And you look through the comments, and most AI slop like has like the comments just roast these creators. All the comments on this thing are like, wow, this is really good. This is too good. So I would say like we're sort of in this uncanny valley spot with AI generated content right now. But I think that as people start to realize you need real filmmakers, you need real actors, you need all the same sort of creative inputs as you have with other content, then it starts to become like, well, maybe we can make stuff, and even if it does have a look, if it's a good story, who the fuck cares, right? And so I think it will just become another way to tell stories.
totally agreed. Before, sorry, Christina, not willing to interrupt you, but I think
I was just going to ask a very deep meta question. It's fine.
we need to talk about authenticity. So there's a lot of more stuff to go deeper into. But before, we only have 5 minutes left. Are there any questions from you guys? Then let's do this for 5 more minutes.
Hi, thank you for giving your insights. I was just wondering if you having more people, more directors approach you about AI, are they curious or are they rejecting it? Like, how are you seeing people sort of, embrace it? Like, are people, directors embracing it or not? Or...
It seems to be in quite extremes. I'm working with one director right now who's just full in, just like, I'm technologically illiterate, but I am technologically pro. And this, you know, and to your point, like, some of these directors are really aware this is all a farce anyway, right? Like the whole medium is this reinterpretation of reality, and he's even said, you know, once we went from film to digital cameras, well, and the fact that we're shooting at 24, and he's like, we shouldn't be, you know, like the floodgates should have, you know, that for him was when the floodgates opened of like, well, if we're not going to shoot film anymore, let's just go nuts, you know? And on the flip side, there seems to be a lot of like, please, like flat out, let's not.
We're also just having a lot of conversations. I know we're talking a lot about features and episodics, but also in the broadcasting space where budgets and schedules are an even bigger issue, right? We just worked with an Austrian broadcaster and they expedited their post-production schedules by 30%, just utilizing a lot of AI supported tools. There is a curiosity for that, and there is an interest in where is that range from it, from being not the budget, the timelines. They were able to speed up their post-production schedule by 30% from the assistive to the expressive workflows. And that can range from camera to cloud and just sharing your footage early to what we have as media intelligence when you're doing, say, a nonfiction project where your editors can just utilize that and find the exact take that they're looking for. That's that bit, or generating certain frames, say in Premiere Pro, where you have that little bit that you're missing and you can extend that frame by 2 seconds. That's ultimately gonna speed up your workflow. But there is a curiosity on that because directors know that there is a huge benefit for them by utilizing that. And there is a curiosity as to tell us what we can do. Like, where is that range?
Yeah, and just one quick note on that, because I heard the tone of your voice when you were like, 30%, did they slash the budget? Like the one example that like we at Eyeline did, and I showed a little bit of this in my presentation today, we did about 5 fully generative shots of like a burning building and then a building collapsing in this Argentinian series called El Entrenada. And that production came to us with 10 days left before they were gonna sort of close DI. So it would have been impossible. We ran a kind of a budget comparison. It took us 22 artist days to finish those shots, and they look great using generative tools. It would have taken us 266 days using traditional visual effects workflow. So you say, wow, geez, that's 1/10 the price. But you would be wrong, because we would have never been able to do it. There wasn't the time. So it actually ended up costing the production more to put these things in, but it made the project better, right? Because it was really the choice of like nothing or this, and it actually elevated the production. But it actually did cost the production more, right? So it's sort of like different lenses and different contexts to like kind of look at these opportunities through.
Exactly. I think perspective is really important, because you don't necessarily have to look at it from like a slashing the budget perspective. I think you could also say, we can now make films or tell stories that otherwise would not have been able to actually get realized. You know, I'm from Germany originally. The budgets are much smaller. There are a lot of filmmakers and there are a lot of stories that may be developed into a film now, because all of a sudden that becomes accessible in a way, and it becomes feasible, because realistically there are no Hollywood budgets to the same level in local markets. But if you can now tell the same story, which may be too local to produce it for an international market, that you can all of a sudden realize. And I think, you know, that, so I think there's also chances in all of this that could have a lot of potential.
I'm very sorry we're running out of time. Thank you, Johnny. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Christina.
everyone.
Thank you, Christina.
If there are any questions, I'm sure you guys will stick around for 5 more minutes.
We're going to
will
run
you?
out immediately.
Okay, then run after them.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.